Anyway, Brittany Brown is the director of the Digital and Technology Division at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. In this role, Brittany manages the Emmy Award-winning NASA television channel, oversees one of the most followed social media presences in the world, and helps manage the Webby Award-winning flagship website, nasa.gov. She has nearly 2 decades of experience in communications, including time spent developing social media strategy for the U.S. Army at the Pentagon and marketing campaigns for National Public Radio in Washington. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Brittany Brown.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor to be a part of the DINFOS Social Media Forum. Actually, I'm a graduate of the PAQC course, so DINFOS, again, is near and dear to my heart. As was mentioned, my name is Brittany Brown, and I'm here to talk to you about NASA's digital strategy. For my presentation today, I will be sharing some tips and best practices and just really tried and true lessons learned from NASA about meeting audiences where they are. So to get started, this is just an outline of how we'll spend our time together today. I'll provide you just a brief overview of our digital landscape, just to level set. I'll talk about those tips and tricks with some real-life examples, and also share ways that you can also share awe and wonder with your audiences across the Department of Defense. And of course, I'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. So let's get into it. As I mentioned, I manage the NASA digital strategy, and I always get questions about what is our approach to managing our flagship channels. And if I were to describe our strategy in one sentence, it would be this. It's sharing the right content on the right channel, distributed at the right time, to the right audience, with the right visual. And as you're looking at this slide and you see all of the words that are in yellow, those words are informed by data. We have data that tells us the optimal times that we should be posting on our social media channels. We have data that tells us who we're engaging with. So let's say that we want to engage young women. We know that some platforms are better suited than others to do that, such as Tumblr, where there's a young demographic on that platform, and it heavily skews towards women. With that being said, I also want to talk a little bit about the digital verticals under my purview. And again, these all have touch points with social media. So again, I have the honor and privilege of working with a fabulous team of content creators, storytellers. We manage NASA's mobile applications, our audio and podcast efforts, our email newsletter, our NASA TV and video production efforts, our photojournalism, so those beautiful images of NASA launches, our social media presence, and the web. And one thing to mention here with all these different functional areas is that social media is a touch point to help get the word out about what's happening in all of these verticals. Our podcast efforts, as an example, would not be successful if we were not promoting them on social media. Our audiences wouldn't know what time to tune in to a launch coverage on NASA TV if we did not share that on social media. And so I encourage all of you to think of social media as a platform, and it should be integrated in everything that you do, including media relations, community relations, outreach, and other communications efforts. With that being said, this is a quick look at the true scale and scope of NASA's digital presence. One of the things to note here is that everything that we do on NASA Digital is organic. I saw some conversation and heard it earlier today during the forum about some of the paid social media posts and marketing on social media that's done by DoD, in particular for recruitment. You know, unlike DoD, we cannot use social media in a paid capacity. And our unique value proposition is that we have visuals, we have content that no one else has. And so, as the slide shows, we have millions of people, literally, who come to us, whether it be through our email newsletter, looking at what we're putting on Instagram, because we are sharing things like what the sun sounds like, beautiful imagery from Mars on our social media accounts, and we have really grown this presence. But we don't go at it alone. Much like DoD, NASA is a huge bureaucratic organization, and we have hundreds of social media accounts. We have more than 600 social media accounts. We've been doing a social media audit to consolidate, but when it comes to our social media presence, we challenge people to think about what makes this account unique. What are you offering audiences that other existing NASA accounts do not offer? And that has helped us succeed, and we'll continue to reevaluate our presence as platforms change. As you see here with X, just like DoD, we're very much in tune to how these platforms change day in and day out, and making sure that we're extremely nimble when it comes to managing these platforms. So now that I've given you that overview of our digital presence, I want to talk a little bit about those tips and tricks. Again, this is the good stuff. These are examples that I hope each one of you can take something from. It may be validating to some of you that you are doing the right thing, you're doing, following industry best practices, and it may also be planting a seed for some of you of things that you can look to do in the future. Again, all of these efforts that we do are done organically based on our outreach, based on our relationship building, which, as you know, is incredibly important when it comes to managing social media. Here's a look at the tips and tricks that we'll talk through. So let's get into it. Looking for conversations and being responsive. One of the ways to meet audiences where they are is to make sure that you are monitoring your mentions. Beyond that, that you are monitoring keywords, even emoji usage, that is related to your brand, related to your organization. In this example here, what I wanted to share is that for every post that goes out on NASA social media, our flagship @NASA accounts, we're engaged in the comments within the first 20 minutes of publishing that post, just to let audiences know that, yes, we are an official source of information. Other people may be replying, but it's important that we take the time and make sure that we're not using this platform simply as a broadcast medium. The other example I have here is a fun one where, again, NASA is not mentioned. It's not using any of our hashtags, but it's a post by NFL player Russell Wilson. The fact that he was sharing content related to astronauts, related to his kids in playful moment in their home, he used an astronaut emoji. By simply having searches set up in your social media dashboards for, again, those keywords, things and topics that are related to your organization, you can look for conversations and be responsive even if you are not tagged in those posts. Here's another fun example that I wanted to share here. We have fun dad jokes as well. In this particular post, published by Chris Evans, he wore a NASA hat, and we made a dad joke saying, "We must ask you a question, where'd the hat go?" And this dad joke just shows that even though we're this huge bureaucratic organization, that we are playful, that we can have fun, and we continue to see even more dad jokes within his comments and other people engaging and loving this comment that we published. Beyond just engaging with celebrities, when it comes to looking for conversations and being responsive, it's important to develop either an FAQ for the questions that you always get on a regular basis. And even if you don't know all the material, everything about your organization, knowing who to go to get that information is pivotal. For all of our missions, what we do is we identify a public affairs officer. And so as an example, we have a launch happening tonight around 11 p.m. And we set up a chat where during that launch coverage, we're going to have PAOs at the ready to help us answer questions that we don't know the answers to so that we can quickly get back to folks on social media. In this example, there's someone who was asking us for resources in Braille, and we were able to quickly, again, use the search on our website to respond to them. But beyond platforms like X, we're thinking of platforms where these conversations are happening, and it is really a community where others are providing resources. And Reddit is a platform in particular where we have seen a lot of success, and we actually post on Reddit every day. We post the latest NASA news because we know that individuals who are deeply invested in what we're doing are, again, talking amongst themselves. And we don't want to interrupt that culture and that conversation, but we want them to know that we're present and that we see what they're doing and that we appreciate that they're educating each other and talking about NASA's mission. Another way to meet audiences where they are is to truly be inclusive. One of the things that I've continued to learn about in recent years is the importance of accessibility. And it is very affirming when I see things like, again, a post on X where someone is saying they were super excited because we had an American Sign Language interpreter on our launch broadcast. On that same note, we had some of our social media posts go viral when we shared images from our James Webb Space Telescope, all because we were using alt text. Using alt text is just the right thing to do, especially for folks who are using assistive technologies. But audiences noticed that our alt text was so detailed and said, hey, if NASA is doing this, why can't you do it? And so if you are not thinking about audiences who don't look like you, who don't have the same experiences as you, you may be leaving out people that you can really engage with and bring in the fold in what you're doing. Now, when it comes to being inclusive, something that we have continued to pour resources into is our Spanish language communications efforts. As you'll see here, nasa.gov, it was mentioned, we get millions of visits every month. And while most of our content is in English, we also have a Spanish version of our website. With Spanish being the second most spoken language in the United States, we leave out a lot of people if we did not have a concerted effort to translate content in Spanish and to allocate content to Spanish language efforts. What was just shared on the screen was an example of a web feature in Spanish, but beyond that, for our live broadcasts and our social media streams, we also do some of those in Spanish. We had a stream on our Twitch channel as an example in Spanish. We've had our Mars Perseverance rover landing coverage, an English broadcast and a Spanish broadcast, so people can choose which way they want to consume our content. And we also make sure that we're intentional about who we're inviting to our events and that we are including various audience segments. Some other examples of being inclusive includes us participating in specific events intended for different audience segments. So you'll see an example here where we had NASA astronaut Victor Glover. He will be headed to the moon next year. He's a Black astronaut, and so it was fitting that he participated in Black Space Week activities with digital creators, with young Black engineers. We have engaged Latinas as well. Again, thinking about what the future of the NASA workforce looks like and making sure that they are included in everything that we do. Now, continuing on to talk about meeting audiences where they are, I encourage you to tap into trends. When I talked a little bit about sharing content on different platforms at the right time, at the right audience, in the right channel, with the right creative, this is an example of our Instagram account. Our Instagram account on NASA is our, by far, most followed account. And one of the things that we do for our Instagram strategy is we make sure that our content is tailored to that specific audience segment. We know that we're reaching younger demographics there. And so what we post on Instagram is not the same copy that we use on Facebook or LinkedIn. And in this particular post, we were doing a play on words for a Cardi B song. And this Cardi B song, WAP, if you've heard of it, it is very raunchy. But while we didn't use the words verbatim, our audience who loves that song, audience members who love that song, immediately got the reference and were like, this is amazing, this is super cool. For those who didn't get the reference, it's okay. They still were able to learn something about Saturn's rings. And while this post was isolated just to our Instagram account, it made its way to X, and it's made its way to Cardi B. And it just shows the power of being authentic to your audience on your platforms and how you can continue to reach more people with a single post. When it comes to tapping into pop culture, some other examples. This is an example where we did a play on words for a Spice Girls song. I will note that our core team at NASA headquarters, that we have team members who span 4 different generations. And so when it comes to curating content for our platforms, and we're going back and forth about copy, about ideas, we have a consensus that at least 2 of those generations have to get the reference. So sometimes it's the boomer and the millennial gets it, and sometimes it's our younger audience members, team members who get it. But again, we make sure that we are coming to the table with our respective experiences and thinking about what will really land with our audiences, depending on what the platform is. Now, I have a question for you all. Who owns the moon? Roll for dish shout out answers. I heard a nobody can. Any other thoughts? Whoever landed there, okay. So India just landed yesterday. Any other guesses? I hear Russia, India. The correct answer is no one owns the moon. So for the gentleman on this side who said no one, you can either choose from a NASA patch or a NASA sticker after this presentation. But the point is, no matter who, the fact that we don't own the moon, we can own a moment. And this has served us so well. When there are things like total lunar eclipses, we will simply share content on our social platforms. We will have a live broadcast on NASA TV and social media, and have, again, those experts at the ready, engaging in comments. And you'll see that for this total lunar eclipse that happened last summer, we got millions of views. Again, this was a relatively low lift for our team. I remember being up for this, helping engage in the comments. It was maybe like 1 or 2 in the morning, but essentially we worked with time and date to get a view from some of their cameras, again, of the eclipse, and we had some subject matter experts just talking, again, and pivoting back and forth between our experts and those views of the total lunar eclipse. And people were engaged. They stayed online and they watched it because they wanted to see this happen. Some other tips and tricks for meeting audiences where they are is teaming up with surrogates. Now, I'm sure all of you have heard about social media influencers. Sometimes the word influencers has a negative connotation, so I tend to say digital creators instead. And I know that we are not allowed to use TikTok, but TikTok is one of my favorite platforms to learn as well as to just be entertained. And on TikTok, I came across this creator who was publishing videos basically doing role play, if the planets could talk. And I have been following him for so long, and he's using F-bombs, and he's just keeping it 100% real, but it was so engaging. And he built up this audience all centered around it. He developed merch and all these other things. And as I continued to follow him, I said, there's gonna be a time where NASA's gonna be able to work with him. And while we cannot, again, pay creators, everything is organic, fast forward to a moment where we were having our Mars Perseverance rover landing. And I said, you know what? We have a rover landing on a planet. This would be a perfect time for me to hit him up. Now, mind you, NASA doesn't have an account on TikTok. This is Brittany just perusing in her free time. And I can't send him a message there saying, hey, I'm NASA. It's just some random girl sending him a message. However, he is on X. And so on X, I jumped into his DMs from our NASA account. And I was like, hey, from NASA, this is Brittany Brown. I lead digital communications. Can you send me an email? I'd love to connect. And we've been connected ever since. Once we were in touch, he was so amazed that NASA saw his content. He actually, as you'll see, took a screenshot of that DM and shared it with his audience, like, look at what happened, NASA DM'd me. But we've developed a relationship since where I reach out to him when we have big moments, and I will just pose a question. Are you interested in being a part of this moment? We have a new Instagram filter. Would you want to participate in Black Hole Week? We have some other things happening to planets. So while we have amassed a huge audience, as I shared earlier, millions of people, we reach even more. We meet audiences where they are by teaming up with these surrogates and really leveraging their audience, their potential, their creativity as essentially brand ambassadors for our agency. Now, on one hand, we'll reach out to digital creators for opportunities like that, like releasing filters or attending launches or coming behind the scenes or even working on a video product. But we also team up with celebrities. And for Earth Day in particular, we actually had a video chat with astronauts from space and Shawn Mendes. And when we had this video chat with Shawn Mendes, again, as I said, we cannot be on TikTok, but Shawn's on TikTok. So while we're sharing this content on platforms like X and Facebook, one of the things that we got out of this in terms of ROI is that he too is reaching younger audience segments on TikTok because our messages are shared on that platform by him as a brand ambassador and as a surrogate for NASA. Another tip that I know has been talked about yesterday as well as today, Jillian's presentation as an example, but letting the data guide you. As those of you who are admins of social media platforms know, there is so much free data available to you natively on all of these platforms. And this data will tell you what your audience wants to see. You don't have to go out and do a focus group. It's right there when you log into YouTube, right there when you log into Instagram. You'll know exactly who you're talking to and what resonates with them. One of the examples listed here is that we had a live chat on our NASA en Espanol X account. And while that account did not even have 1 million followers, in terms of impressions, the number of times that this content was seen surpassed 9 million. It showed that, again, having our subject matter experts available for those one-on-one interactions really lands well, as opposed to just faceless posts that don't have a lot of meaning for some of our audiences. This is a fun example of letting the data guide us. This is some data I pulled from our Google Analytics. We saw that we were getting so much traffic to this one particular page on nasa.gov, and as we started to do some digging, it was about this one small planet, exoplanet, and because, again, we're looking at the data, trying to figure out what's the source of this, we realized that it became a trending topic on X and other platforms that rapper Lil Uzi Vert had purchased this exoplanet. And again, while NASA does not sell exoplanets, this was a conversation and an opportunity for us looking at that data, looking at the conversation to educate audiences about what exactly an exoplanet is, how exoplanets and other celestial bodies are named. And so data, unusual, it's been flat all this time. We see that there's huge uptick. And so for us, in terms of our strategy, all right, this is a good time to put on the homepage and tag at the very top exoplanet content. This is a good time to share a social media post that says, what is an exoplanet? Let us explain, without necessarily trying to bait him into responding to us and making it a conversation between NASA and Lil Uzi Vert. It was about educating audiences and, again, meeting them where they are, listening to the conversations that matter to them. The last tip that I will share with you about meeting audiences where they are is the importance of creating moments. For years, NASA has managed what we call a NASA social program. And this program is essentially, again, us tapping into that unique value proposition. We don't have a huge budget, we can't do marketing, we can't do paid ads, but what we do have are amazing facilities. We have subject matter experts. We have hands-on activities. And so with this social media program, what we do is we open up the doors to NASA. We invite the public in. We give them a chance to apply to attend a NASA social event. So ahead of a launch, 2 or 3 days as an example, they can visit our facilities. They can go see our food processing lab. They can go see where astronaut crew quarters are, as an example. For this picture that's listed here, this was a NASA social that I curated with the National Air and Space Museum here in DC. I knew that we were going to have our Artemis astronauts, Artemis 2, a mission going to the moon next year. And while they were, again, focused on visits to the Hill and other important meetings, I asked my colleagues, can I just have an hour of their time one evening? Worked with the Air and Space Museum. And after the museum closed, we had this intimate experience where we were able to, again, provide a tour of the museum with their curators, with these astronauts. And while, again, this was a small, intimate group of less than 20 people, by curating the right people to be in that space, we reached literally millions of people. I was very intentional about what that guest list looked like. I was very intentional about reaching out to younger audiences, thinking about not the Apollo generation, but the Artemis generation with us going back to the moon, thinking about engaging younger audiences. And so, again, while we're not on TikTok, I looked at TikTokers who are passionate about space. I jumped in their DMs. I scoured their websites to look for their email address to say, hey, would you want to come to this event? And we actually have folks outside of DC who were willing to travel on short notice, again, not being paid by NASA, to attend this event, to share this experience with these astronauts, to learn about the mission, and then share it with their audiences. And we provide them with unique things like being able to touch a moon rock. And that's something incredibly simple that you can do with your access, with your knowledge, with your facilities across DoD as well. So with this being said, those are some of my tips and tricks, tried and true, that have worked really well for building NASA's social media audience and our digital channels. And I welcome any questions that you may have for me.
How you doing, ma'am? Zion Dillon Hunt here. I'm just curious, like, for my platform at MatchCon, we really don't get a whole lot of comments. So what would you suggest, I should try to do to try to, I guess, get the audience we have more engaged to comment? Because I would be very willing to interact, but we just get so few comments that I don't really have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, one of the things that has worked for us when it comes to trying to get our audiences engaged is to lead our posts with an open-ended question, and a question that anyone can answer. I think about my time when I did manage the Army social media accounts, again, way back in the day. So to give you an example of that, if I were posting a social media engagement question on the Army Facebook page, I can say something like, what was your basic training like? The only people who can answer that are folks who went to basic training, right? But if I just tweak that question very slightly to something like, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of a drill sergeant? That's something anyone can answer. And so I encourage you to think of what those open-ended engagement questions could look like to let your audiences know that you want to hear from them, and continue to do that. And over time, I think that you will find some success in some of your audience members engaging in the comments.
No, yes, okay. Hi, I'm Emily. I work with Space Operations Command for the Space Force, and I just want to say that I used NASA's homepage to learn about the different layers of orbit, so LEO and cislunar, so I appreciate that. I had a question about your social media and content planning. We've talked a lot about different audiences use different forms of social media to engage or to learn more about different pieces of information. And so I was wondering, do you post the same content at the same time across all platforms of social media, or do you have a strategy to kind of differentiate content to better reach your audiences?
Yes, so that's a great question. There are multiple ways that we go at this. One thing that we do is we have a meeting with our news team every morning to talk about what's the news of the day at NASA. Sometimes we'll have a heads up about things that are being released. Like today we had a release of an image that we knew about in advance so we could prep copy. But when it comes to the actual nuts and bolts of what we post when it goes out, with any piece of content, we take a look at it to figure out at the onset who wants to hear about this, which platforms will be a good fit for this. So if it's something like a job announcement, that's only going on LinkedIn, right? If it is information about a high visibility mission, such as a launch, that goes everywhere. But that content about that launch is tailored to that platform. So what we'll do is, let's say there's a web feature announcing that we're gonna have a launch with SpaceX, that we're sending astronauts to the space station. That web feature, we will take a look at it, we'll see which image the newsroom has identified to go with it. More than likely, that image isn't a good fit for our Instagram. So we'll then look and see what other images are available to share that same content and the same messaging, but in a different way, tailored just for Instagram. When it comes to writing those posts and some of that, again, the back and forth that happens in our chat between our team, they draft, typically copy that specific to X, copy that specific to Facebook, copy that specific to LinkedIn, and copy that specific to Instagram. In some instances, there may be a piece of news content. Let's say we just got sounds back from Mars, our Mars rover. That can be a quick one-liner, and more than likely that one-liner can go across multiple platforms. So we really assess it on a case-by-case basis. But to answer your question, typically, we do not share the same copy across all platforms. We'll make small tweaks, even if it's just changing the hashtags that are included to make sure it's tailored for the audience, and it's a tone that's appropriate for that audience.
Hello, my name is Aaron. I work with the DASI of Chemical and Biological Defense. One of the things that we're worried about is nefarious actors taking advantage of some sort of incident that occurs. And I would imagine NASA has a lot of similar things with like flat earthers and other people doing disinformation. So I'm kind of wondering, what are your doctrinal things that you're pushing to your people so that when somebody wants to spread misinformation, it's addressed in an appropriate manner that doesn't erode credibility?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. So in a very short answer, we never feed the trolls. because we have such a large audience, it really is self-policing. I mean, if we were to go back and forth with people who, as an example, said NASA never went to the moon, that this happened on the movie set, I mean, we'd be doing that all day. And so one of the beautiful things about having such a large audience is that our audience members who, again, have spent a lot of time engaging with our content, reading our sources of information, will go back and forth and essentially do some of that community management for us. And sometimes it works out better that way because, again, an individual may have more credibility than a government organization, especially if you're already skeptical and you wouldn't believe what NASA would say anyway. Some other things that we have in place for things like that, our newsroom has developed responses to nearly every conspiracy theory that's out there. For some of those media queries that even come in to say, hey, I saw this photo go viral, is this real? Can you tell us if this is valid? And so it really helps that, again, we're in lockstep with our newsroom and our public affairs officers about the messaging related to all of those things. And we also, at the end of the day, when it comes to social media and just as a communications professional, the most important things that we can do for, again, our communications efforts, make sure that we are transparent, the content that we're sharing is accurate. And those are two tenets that we take with us with everything that we do. So as an example, we never engage in April Fool's jokes. There are a lot of brands that do, but our stance is if we were to even just do this on one day, April 1st, one day out of 365, the other days people may assume that, hey, this content that you put out there, it might be a joke. So we take it very seriously when it comes to those conspiracy theories and how we engage and what we share. And for those highly sensitive topics, they are always coordinated with our news chief and our newsroom before anything goes out on our social media accounts. Because essentially, again, while it's just a post on X or it's just an Instagram reply, those can make news as well. So that coordination is so, so crucial.
Hi, my name is Brittany Branch, and I'm with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. I help run their social media accounts.
I love your name.
Oh, thank you. I like your name. My question is, because I'm really fascinated by NASA's interaction in the comments, especially immediately after posting, and that's something that we've talked about at the NGA, trying to do more of. But with our approval processes, just to get content out to begin with, it's challenging to then turn around and interact immediately. So could you talk a little bit more about your approval processes and how it differs from your initial post and then what you might interact in the comments with?
Yeah. So over time, we've really built the trust and confidence of our colleagues across communications and also subject matter experts across the agency, and not having a lot of snafus, and that we don't have a lot of layers of approval. Again, we kind of talk amongst ourselves as like a social team before anything goes out on NASA, but if we ever have any second doubts, that's when we route it to a public affairs officer. The most important thing for us when it comes to approvals and kind of cutting that down is making sure we know the right people to go to. Our public affairs and newsroom team is kind of split up and assigned by beats. So we have a public affairs officer solely for the International Space Station, one solely for aeronautics, so on and so forth. And what we have done at the onset is set up meetings with them to kind of get to know one another and have like a social digital one-on-one. Here's what we do, here's what we experience. Here's, again, we published this just right now on Instagram, and within 20 minutes, we have thousands of comments. So them being able to see it in real time makes a world of a difference. Back before the pandemic, for some of our live broadcasts, what we used to do is we would book a conference room, and we would have on, again, the big screen, YouTube feed. So they're seeing all of these comments coming in so fast, and they're just like, wow, how do you know which one to answer? How do you know if somebody is a real person or a troll, which I know was talked about earlier. When you look at their profile, see if they have a profile picture, et cetera, et cetera. And so, again, once they come to know what you do, and again, peeling back the layers, you can help build trust and confidence in them and that, hey, you know what you're doing. At the very beginning, I will say that our content and our posts were very monotone. They were simply, let's just take a line from the news release or news feature because that's a safe option. And we continued to do that. We didn't have any issues. And then as time went on, that's when we started to, okay, let's have a little fun. Let's be a little cheeky. Send it to them for approval. But again, as time has gone on, it's building that relationship where, again, those layers and those walls have really come down.
Hello, my name is Rachel from West Point. So my question is about all the different accounts you have. You have so many accounts.
Yes.
Do you often find that you share information from one account to another account? And if so, are there any pros and cons to sharing that information between your own, all those accounts under NASA?
Yes. For big agency news announcements, our approach is to coordinate which account leads. To your point, if there's big news, such as, India landing on the moon, that is huge international news where we want to have a senior leader lead with that news. And so yesterday, our administrator for NASA, former Senator Bill Nelson, led with that news. And it was coordinated with our International Relations Office. We were very intentional about having him be the spokesperson for the agency, congratulating them, and then various accounts amplify that content on X, meaning the @flagship, @NASA account, our NASA Artemis account, our NASA Moon account, and even astronauts who are interested and excited about it. And so that kind of coordination happens when, again, it's a piece of news and we want a specific account to lead. In other instances, it may be appropriate that there's agency news going out there, but multiple accounts want to share it, and that's okay because we cannot assume that users follow all of our accounts. That's just not the case. And so we're A-okay with multiple accounts sharing the same kind of content, but sharing it in a way that's authentic to their audience. One of the ways that we do this coordination is we have a digital call every Thursday with our digital community. On Thursday afternoons, we have simply a document that lists everything happening the next few months. And we'll go through that list and say, okay, for this coordinated effort, who's leading? Okay, who wants to be a part of this? Let's share our messaging so that we can compare what that messaging looks like. So hopefully that provides kind of insight about some instances we have a single account leading and sharing news, and other instances it's A-okay for multiple accounts to point to that single point of news and share it in an authentic way with their respective audience.
Hi, I'm Tiana Waters from Fort Belvoir Public Affairs Office at the Garrison Headquarters. And my question is, you talked about engagements. We engage a lot with our stakeholders as well, retirees, soldiers, family members, and even with our local representatives and supervisors. So with that being said, we also get a lot of trolls. So how do you manage the negative comments and the trolls that are also engaging under your post?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. My philosophy has been always don't engage the trolls, but there's a caveat there. Over time, it's been incredibly important to me, as I've shared, to be inclusive and to have more diverse representation on our digital channels. We've seen a lot of uptick in personal attacks. And for that in particular, again, I have a different stance. In that instance, I want to make sure that we are protecting our workforce, that we are protecting the people when we share them on our social media accounts. As an example, trying to reach young women, we have accounts called Women at NASA. Sometimes we get some really sexist, nasty comments on there. And if I am asking a woman, astronaut or scientist, or engineer, whoever, to have her story shared on social media, other people are going to be reluctant to do that if they look at that post and see personal attacks and nasty comments. So in that instance, I have and had to advocate really hard for this with our head of communications as well as our lawyers to say we need to put some parameters in place where it's okay to, as an example, on platforms like Facebook, hide comments, where again, the person who posted it will think that it's still there, but the public at large does not see it. In those cases, I am a little heavy-handed in terms of managing those comments, but when it comes to comments on the other hand, like the gentleman asked about, flat earthers, again, they have a right to believe that. I am not going to delete that comment just because that's what they believe. But personal attacks, on the other hand, we do moderate those comments so that our audience does not think that we are condoning that kind of behavior on our channels.
All right, is this on? Okay. I'm Natalie Perkins, and I work for the Center for Development for Security Excellence. And I actually follow your page personally, and I think we also followed on our official account. Amazing content. But my mind boggled when I saw your page about all your different followers, your different accounts. But my question is, you talk a little bit about trust as far as with the SMEs and with your leadership. I know for us, our trust was earned, but part of it was earned because we actually we're a training organization. We provide security training for DoD and cleared industry. We actually took the training. Our main public affairs people took the training and become certified. So we actually verify, we're not SMEs, but we know a lot about our products, and it helps us. So, a lot of people say, well, it's not rocket science, social media, but in this instance, with NASA, there is rocket science, and you're dealing with a lot of scientific, technical things. When you have social media people come in, do they get some kind of orientation or training? Do you have something formal? I mean, you don't just say, go look at the website and then start creating posts. Do you have some kind of program?
We do not have an official program. However, we do make sure that everyone who has access, at least to our flagship accounts, that they have what we consider kind of a right seat, left seat to understand what we do, how we do it, what the process looks like. I can't give you an exact number of days, but I would say estimating, let's say we were onboarded a new social media specialist, they probably won't have passwords to our accounts, at least for the first 90 days. They're really getting up to speed, they're learning. Even, let's say, interns as an example. Interns, again, digital natives know how to do all of this stuff, but again, they need to make sure that they are in lockstep with communications best practices, our messaging approach, our posture, even things like, let's say they want to share a GIF, a popular GIF. For us, we've learned, again, from branding that that's someone's IP. We have our own NASA GIFs, our astronaut reaction GIFs. We don't share a GIF of, let's say, the Elmo burning on fire, right? And so it's about educating them and telling them those kind of things. And we use, I know, again, earlier we talked about social media management tools. Some of you use Hootsuite. Our current social media management tool is Sprinkler. And in Sprinkler, we have levels of approval. So again, when we're onboarding new folks, what we can do is have them draft posts, stage them in Sprinkler, and then it goes to someone for approval. And again, we have that informal training, if you will, to kind of get them up to speed on how we do things, what's appropriate. But before anything goes out on social media, whether it's even a reply or even determining what we like on the flagship accounts, no one makes that decision unilaterally, except for me. But for the team, again, they work, because sometimes, again, like on TikTok, I may be scrolling Twitter. I'm not going to call my social media manager and be like, it's okay for me to like this. So again, if it's after hours or something. But for the most part, the team always has someone that they check with before they take any action, whether they're newer member of the team or if they've been on the team for years.
Hi, Riley Wilson from NIST. So along sort of a similar lane as onboarding and training new staff, how do you maintain consistency in your brand guidelines and sort of best practices across those non-flagship accounts, and what sort of oversight do you have for that?
Yes, so that is talked about each week in that digital call whenever there are new updates on all of the platforms or best practices or things that we've learned. We share it in that forum. And then we also have an internal website, intranet basically, where we house all of our best practices. So you want to create an Instagram reel, you can go to the Instagram section. We'll tell you what kind of music you can use, what kind of music you shouldn't use, what kind of captions you should have, should you have burned-in captions. All of that stuff is listed there. Using X as an example. We were, again, assessing the landscape, figuring out, okay, we still calling this Twitter, or is this happening? Is it not happening? Is it going to be X? And what we decided as a community is that once they officially updated their brand guidelines that has X, then we would start transitioning to calling it X. Because we saw the conversations about who exactly owns it, who, trademark, all of that stuff. And at that point, all right, we talked as a community and we let everyone know, moving forward, again, pixels are cheaper than paper. On your websites, on social media and other platforms, stop using Twitter, use X. We're not telling you to go reprint everything, posters and all those other things, but at a minimum right now, and if you're doing news features and other things, you should call it X. And so we use that call to disseminate information. We also have an email list, so if you don't participate on Thursdays, we'll send a note with all of that information so that everyone knows the latest. So for the India landing yesterday, we sent guidance saying, hey, the administrator's leading for the agency, no original post. You can repost what he shares. If you do decide you want to post something, let us know so we can coordinate with our international office. So that's just a snapshot of how we coordinate across all of those account holders. Essentially, that email is a foolproof way to reach all of them within a moment's notice. Let's say that there's a school shooting. There have been a lot of those, unfortunately, but in those instances, we'll send a note to say, hey, watch the tone of what you're posting. If you had some playful content, unschedule it. We're not saying that you can't post, but just be mindful of how this may land compared to the trending topics right now.
Ms. Brown, we had one question come in from online.
Okay.
NASA has a lot of awe-inspiring things going on and has the opportunities to ride national-level trends. How do you serve the communication needs of the less sexy portions of the organization?
Yes. So let's say a less sexy portion of the organization. This is not Brittany's opinion. The second A in NASA is aeronautics. I've heard from some folks that aeronautics doesn't get as much love as our space content, as an example. One of the things that we do, similar to how the newsroom is structured, is across at least the flagship social media team, we have team members who are assigned a beat. And so even for those less sexier topics, that person is tasked to stay up to date with the latest news and information for those less sexier beats and to bring forth recommendations of how we should share content. And also, we encourage them to be creative and making that unsexy content appealing to our audiences.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Ms. Brown.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. On behalf of Colonel McNorton and the Defense Information School, I'd like to present with you this certificate of appreciation for your time today. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Brown will be available in room 112 if anyone has any follow-on questions. Pending those, we're going to move on break. And we are going to start our next presentation a little early at 15:15. So we're going to move 15 minutes ahead of schedule. And our next speaker is going to begin at 15:15.